Directly across from the Columbus Circle subway station in Manhattan, a number of food carts line up every morning. They offer an international array of culinary delights. While I stood waiting for an uptown bus to the seminary, I watched a young man stop for lunch at a cart run by Hare Krishnas that was reported to serve the absolute best hot dogs in all of New York City. As he approached the cart, he called out, "Sir, I'd like one with everything." And he waited patiently while the server cooked his sausage, placed it in a bun, then smothered it with onions, mustard, ketchup, sauerkraut, and relish. He paid for this delicacy with a $10 bill, and again, he waited patiently until finally he asked, "Please, sir, where's my change?" To which the Krishna replied, "Change comes from within." Rabbi Sherry Hirsch explains change in a very engaging metaphor. Whether it's our cozy bedroom or our toy-strewn family room or our newly renovated kitchen, each of us has our favorite room in our home. But how often do we ever think about the hallways? We spend a lot of time traversing the hallways and crossing the thresholds, both in our homes and in our lives. The thresholds of our lives are those moments when we stand between the way we were accustomed to living and a new way of thinking, feeling, and being. I'm talking about those moments when we are preparing to enter a new room, to take the next step on the journey of our lives. Beth Israel stands at just such a threshold, a moment of change and hope, or I would not be here speaking to you this evening. After we conclude the description of the process for building the tabernacle in the Torah, Aaron and his sons are commanded to begin ritual sacrifice. And once the mess was made, the priests were also commanded to clean up. They had to remove the ashes and charred remains and take it all outside the camp. The young priests were so zealous and so jealous of each other, they would race to be the first to the temple to perform even the dirtiest of tasks. Tractate Talmud 22a records that one day in their fervor to be first, one priest accidentally knocked another off the steps. The one who fell broke his leg. The temple priests then instituted a game to see who would get which job. It must have been similar to playing rock, paper, scissors. But even this simple change was difficult for the priests to accept. Rabbi Simcha Bunim presents a new vision regarding the performance of sacrificial rituals. He quotes the Talmud in Menachot, "All who occupy themselves in Torah have no need for the burnt offering, the meal offering, or the sin offering, or even the guilt offering." And this is based on the first book of Samuel, chapter 15, verse 22, where we read, "Does Adonai delight in burnt offerings and sacrifice, as much as in obedience to Adonai's command? Surely obedience is better than sacrifices." Even Maimonides taught animal sacrifice was only an intermediate step of ritual to distance our ancestors from the human sacrifices offered by neighboring pagans. In an interesting article in E-Jewish Philanthropy, Rabbi Andy Kastner showed that this pre-temple biblical argument pitting maintaining the old sacrificial ways against changes that the community believed were necessary still exists. Rabbi Moses Sofer proclaimed, "That which is new is biblically forbidden." With these words, he attacked the Haskalah or Enlightenment movement of European Jewry, reforming and reconstructing that old-time religion. Just a century later, Rabbi Avraham Yitzchak Kook, the first chief Ashkenazi rabbi of British Mandatory Palestine, facing the socialist, secular second wave of Aliyah, realized that rather than being an evil that needed to be rooted out, it could, in fact, be a tool to reframe Jewish wisdom in a changing world. To quote him, Hechadash yitkadesh, v'hakadosh yitchadesh. The new will become sacred, and the sacred will become new. We stand firmly in the threshold of change of which Harav Kook spoke. Many predict the end of conservative Judaism. I remember the early 60s when the American Jewish community prepared to recite Kaddish for Orthodoxy. It was disappearing. I recall the mid-70s to 80s when Reform Judaism was going away. Yet both movements discovered ways to strengthen themselves and retain their place in the evolution of Judaism. Now it's our turn. While many religious scholars faced our pandemic shaking and quaking, unable or unwilling to find creative ways to thrive, our conservative movement was reviewing and renewing our interpretations of halakha to enable us to flourish. We questioned the length and style of our tefillot, reconstructing them to meet the needs of a virtual world. We re-energized our congregations. The only guarantee in life is that change is a constant. The infant we were is barely noticeable in the adolescent we become or the adult we strive to be. Each stage of life is an exciting and unpredictable adventure to which we must adjust. Yet we always look forward to tomorrow. We dream of the great future that lies ahead. Jack Wertheimer, in his book, The New American Judaism, produced a treasure map to discovering the conservative Jewish future. He believes to this day that JTS, Ziegler, USCJ, the RA, the CA, the EA, NAASA, FJMC, and WLCJ have failed to create a movement because they were unable to produce a shared mission or vision. Where does he see the strength and beauty of conservative Judaism, where it still exists? Right here in this congregation, in your Beth Israel, and in hundreds of other synagogues across America and around the world. The innovations needed to strengthen our beloved movement are being developed in synagogue sanctuaries, meeting rooms, in the processes moving us forward for causes of social justice and Jewish learning. Dr. Wertheimer believes that the rabbis, cantors, educators, lay leaders, and congregational family members are leading us in the direction we need to go. Our national organizations need to catch up and keep up with the wisdom that congregations like this are discovering every day. I foresee a rebirth within our synagogues and movement. Concepts of synagogue membership and governance need to be reviewed. Our services need to be re-examined and reinvigorated. Many believe that the Chazanisha Recitative and the golden age of Chazanut were a response to Jews being barred from the opera halls of Europe. And if that is true, it is time for us to renew, rejuvenate, and reanimate the musical structure of American synagogues. We need to adjust to the technical age and learn to use its gifts. It is not holding blindly to the rule of sacrifice that God wants from us. It is the study of Torah that our Creator seeks. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai realized after the temple was destroyed that God's words and our spirits still burned brightly. The early rabbis responded radically. They evolved in order to remain relevant. The challenges of the modern world are surmountable. The COVID pandemic is defeatable. Jewish ignorance is confrontable. But change comes from within. We were created to change, from infancy to adolescence to adulthood. Our synagogues need to cross over new thresholds, need to discover compelling new meaning that will engage new generations of Jews. The time to move synagogue culture forward is now. Change can only come from within us, within our synagogues. For synagogues will not thrive by what we used to do, but only will begin to grow again, become meaningful and vibrant by what we are yet to create. Ani ma'amin. I believe that we have the vision, we have the wisdom, and we have the desire to make our future as beautiful as we are willing to make it. Let us say, Amen. Baruchim tiyu. Any questions? This may be your only chance. I only have 3 more question and answer sessions scheduled. I guess not. Well, thank you all for coming this evening, whether you are here in person or on Zoom. It is a pleasure to see you and begin to get to know the people and the beauty and the wisdom of Beth Israel.
Thank you, Rabbi Ezring. And I like your optimistic view of the future of our movement. Would like, and it is all on us to do it. Just want to remind everybody of some upcoming sessions to engage with Rabbi Ezring. Tomorrow morning, he will be giving a Dvar Torah during Morning Minyan. So Morning Minyan starts at 8 o'clock. We will actually have it in person and on Zoom. Then at noontime tomorrow, there's going to be a lunchtime learning session that will be solely on Zoom. And then from 4 to 5 tomorrow, there will be sort of a drop-in Zoom where if you think of a question that you didn't ask tonight or on any topic, Rabbi Ezring will be able to answer that. And then tomorrow evening, he will be leading Evening Minyan and giving another Dvar Torah. And then Wednesday morning from 9 to 10, there will be another drop-in Zoom session. So, and at that point, he's going to be totally exhausted and be thrilled to be out of our hair, but we've been enjoying interacting with you very much. Thank you.
Good night once again, everyone. Oh, Howard has a question.
And the change you talked about coming from the congregations themselves and not from the national leadership. Do you think it's within the congregation? Does that come from initiated by the rabbi? Do you think it's initiated by the congregation? And what's the interplay you foresee?
Let me explain my vision.
Before you answer, can you repeat the question, please, for Zoom?
Yes,
Thank you.
I think. Regarding the change that I'm talking about, do I believe that it should come from the leadership to the congregation, from the congregation to the leadership, or from the rabbi? And my vision of the way a synagogue that will exist in the future and be successful is only if we work as a team. That most changes, most programmatics are best when they come from the ground up, because those of us who are maybe envisioned as the top are not necessarily in tune with what everyone else wants. So the only way to find that out is to get the grassroots of our synagogue to get active and tell us what they're looking for. And then we have to be willing to figure out how we can provide the type of program, project, religious experience that they're looking for. You're welcome. Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm going to repeat it. Let me at least tell her first it was a wonderful question. So that's a change we have to make. Don't jump down the rabbi's throat before he finishes speaking. So the question that was just asked was, what have I done as an interim rabbi to reach out into the community, either the Jewish community or the general community? And I will tell you, to be quite honest, not very much, except to teach the congregation how to do these things. In Charlotte and in my first congregation in New Jersey and in Boca, we started becoming very active socially as far as social justice goes. And that's very important because it's a major commandment stated many times in the Torah. But most congregations hire interim rabbis to bring them back together, to heal what we find needs to be healed, to heal that which you feel needs to be healed, and that allows the congregation to go forward. I will share with you some of the things we did in Norfolk. We started as the pandemic was falling to think about Pesach. And we put together a large committee, and I should really call it a project, because we only asked people to work on this one project. And that's a lesson that congregations have to work on learning. Standing committees are not real popular with younger people. But a project that they're interested in, that might work. So we wanted to make sure that every member of the congregation before Pesach had matzah. We wanted to make sure that they had whatever they needed. We wanted to make sure that they had the means to have a Seder. So we provided virtual copies of several different Haggadot to them. And we had everything delivered by hand to each door by a committee which was made up of probably 150 to 160 people. And everyone, they couldn't get a committee together that was that big, but Norfolk was a lot like Baltimore. It's spread out. It can take 40 minutes for some of our members to drive to the synagogue. So you don't want them to have to come pick up their gift. They need to have it delivered. So we found members in every community and had them do the delivering in their home communities. We also gathered food before Rosh Hashanah to be distributed to the Jewish poor and to the general population poor. And again, we had over 150 people volunteering to do this. And we had in Charlotte, everyone wanted a community Seder. You know what? People don't really want community Seders, especially when they're costing $100 or more a plate. You want to be able to sit at a Seder? $100. You want to be able to eat the food? Another 25. Yeah. So we came up with this concept of a cooperative Seder, where to come to the Seder, you had to agree to cook, shop, set up, clean up, help lead the Haggadah parts of the Seder. And the only thing we didn't ask people to do was clean the pots. The pots were washed by people we hired. The price of the Seder fell from $85 to $90 to $30 an adult, and I think it was $15 a child. And for my last 3 years in Charlotte, we had cooperative Seders. It was wonderful. Everyone enjoyed it. And no one complained about the food because they didn't know whether what they were going to complain about was made by their friend next door. So the food was delicious. And the voices who were leading services, mwah! Even our cantor couldn't compare because they didn't know who they're, what are you going to tell your best friend? That you didn't like the way he sang? It was a beautiful Seder all around. But those are the kinds of things that I can do. We had a woman in Norfolk who, she was one of the most loving people you'll ever meet, and a big pain in the neck, because once she had an idea, she would call every day. She'd knock on your door. She'd remind you of the idea. You said it was a nice idea, Rabbi. Are you going to help? You know what she did? There was a tent city that developed 2 or 3 blocks from where we lived, right behind a school and right in front of a preschool and across from a community center. 19 families were living there. And every day she delivered to that tent city bagels, cream cheese, some kind of drink, and bottles of water. And she needed help because she couldn't do it all by herself anymore. And then she let us know there was a bigger tent city in downtown Norfolk at the Greyhound bus depot. This is during COVID. Who was taking a bus? They were in the parking lot of the bus depot. And they had policemen guarding them so that the bad guys couldn't bother them. And because of this woman, Beth El got involved in this project, and the city turned over these 2 tent cities, which became one in the middle of downtown, to our synagogue, which then had to reach out to churches to help us because it was too massive a program for a 400 or 500 family congregation to do on its own. So we were performing mitzvot, we got the synagogue active, we reached out and were partnering with churches, some African American, some Protestant, standard Protestant, mainstream Protestant. And look at all the things that you were doing all at once. Because you got to listen to your members. You got to find out what the members of Beth Israel are doing already and see what help we can give them. And you'll never know what a big difference it will do for the synagogue until we start looking and contacting them. Yes.
A couple questions that came up. You read them or give them to you like this? 2 questions that came.
Oh, boy. Three people know how to ask hard questions. As a transitional rabbi, how do you see your role in helping the congregation move toward the future? Because I will be here to help push you along and I will help teach the congregation how to be relational, because that's the key to success in a congregation. That's the secret of the evangelical churches. To be relational, let people know they're wanted, that you're concerned about them. When was the last time this congregation called every elderly member who you haven't seen in services in the last month? About a year ago. Well, a lot happens in a year. It's time to do it again. And when was the last time that the congregation had a team of people who, when someone was in the hospital, made sure that they were called every day? Okay? That's relational. And it doesn't take a lot of work. And those are the kinds of things that I can do. I can help remind the congregation of what your goal is, what you want to accomplish that will make you desirable to a new rabbi. Because I'm going to tell you, Baltimore won't do it. Because there are plenty of big cities with large Jewish communities, with kosher restaurants and day schools around the country. But I will help you discover what makes you special. Second question is, if the change comes from the ground up, i.e. the congregations, how do we consolidate those changes across our movement? Well, that depends on what the change is. If I think you're all old enough to remember the Million Man March on Washington. Well, that next morning, my men's club the leadership of the men's club met with me to try to decide what we could do. And all they wanted to do was figure out how to get 1 million Jews together in Washington. And I said, it ain't going to happen. Don't worry about it right now. So let's see what else we could do that might be meaningful. And we came up with the most astounding ideas you can imagine. We should have a bicycle ride and get the whole Jewish population of Charlotte to ride around on bicycles. That didn't work. That didn't pass. And then someone said, well, we should wrap tefillin. And I don't know, we can't do that. The Chabad already do that on every street corner in major cities. And we went around and around. 20 minutes later, I said, let's go back and talk about that tefillin thing. I said, what if instead of shooting for 1 million people, we tried to get 100 people who have never laid tefillin before to come to a morning service on a Sunday morning and put on tefillin for the first time in their life? And so we started working on it. The first tefillin wrap was in November in the circular drive of the JCC across from where our synagogue was. We had 108 men and women who had never put tefillin on before. And our men's club president wrote it up, sent it into the Torch for the Federation of Jewish Men's Clubs. And the worldwide wrap has been now going for 21 years. It started in Charlotte, North Carolina. And when we started it, we weren't looking in terms of a worldwide wrap that would have 150,000 people putting on tefillin on Super Bowl Sunday every year. But that's what it's become. It's so easy to find something. And if what we do can catch the eye of men's club or women's league, that's how, or even United Synagogue, that's how we affect the whole movement. And look how many congregations have followed Sinai Temple in Los Angeles after they hired Craig Taubman to do Friday Night Live. how many of our synagogues have rock bands leading Friday night or Shabbat morning services today? A greater number than ever before. And you know what? When I grew up, I would say, oh, that Reformed synagogue is having an organ. It's a church. It's not really Jewish. Like, we're not allowed to have. Well, you know what? I was looking for a job my last 2 years of rabbinical school, and I was asked to apply for the assistant to the rabbi position in South Orange, New Jersey, where they have one of the biggest pipe organs in any shul in the world. And they started playing with the Torah service. And suddenly, from the back of the room, the officers of the congregation come marching in top hats and morning suits, except for the woman who was vice president. She wore a pinstripe suit and a black hat. And oh my God, am I in the wrong place? So I went back to school on Monday, and I went to the provost of the school, and I said, Joe, this really isn't for me. He said, why not? I said, it's like a church. They play an organ. He said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call them today, and I'm going to get them to extend their offer for 1 week. And you are going to start today and do a comprehensive study of the use of musical instruments in Jewish history. Boy, did I learn what I should have known all my whole life. Not only was there a Levitical orchestra that played at every service, every day of the year in the temple in Jerusalem, but there were lots of congregations throughout history. Would you believe that Nachmanides had musical instrumentation in his services, and that all of his students did too? The number of rabbis historically that had musical instruments. There's a place in the Talmud. There's a place in the Talmud where when you're reading, all of a sudden it says you're not allowed to slap your thigh or stomp your feet, dance in the synagogue on Shabbat. And Rashi says, well, why not? And he says, oh, because you might fall and break the instruments. And what question is raised in your minds when you read that? What instruments? It was Shabbat. Well, that's not where this ends. It ends 2 generations later when the Tosafot say, Grandpa, in your age, every Jew may have been able to fix musical instruments, and therefore there was a concern that they might fix an instrument on Shabbat. In our generation, there's not a one of us who can fix a musical instrument. We got to take it to the non-Jewish instrument repairman down the street to have it done during the week. Therefore, Shema Yitakein, you might break it, doesn't hold. And these kinds of things are all over the Talmud. And we're going to talk about 1 or 2 of them tomorrow in the morning minyan and the evening minyan. So, any other questions? Thank you for those questions from Zoom. No one else? I don't see any hands on Zoom. If you want to ask a question, raise your yellow hand. That's a response button. Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure. If I touch,
It appears that there is one question coming on Zoom.
oh, can you
Jerry Plotkin.
Okay.
tell me what it is?
It hasn't come through yet. I asked him to type it out.
Okay.
Rabbi, I'm Jerry Kolodkin, and
If we
I think
if
also
we change the screen, it all blacks. Okay. I could do a magic trick, except I don't have anything
Martha,
to
come
do
here
a
a
magic
minute.
trick with at the moment.
Come here, I'm making a comment to the
So-
rabbi about something. Come here.
Yeah, I could sing. Well, I can't dance, and my singing is not what it was when I was young.
Someone was trying to
Um,
ask a question, Rabbi.
But I was an amateur magician, and I used to perform in benefits. And my wife is very angry at me that I packed up about 30 tricks and brought them with us to Florida. But they take up a lot of room, and it takes a lot of practice to do them. But
Jerry, what was your
she wouldn't let
question?
me bring the train. She
Mine's
was
more of
afraid
a
I'd put them
comment,
together.
really.
We have a
Um,
nice big 2-car garage.
Jerry, I don't think they can hear you. You have to type your question in.
Any luck,
Okay,
Becca?
I'm kind of hard to.
Jerry, I can pass it along if you tell it to me.
All right, here's the question. It's more of a comment than anything. I also belong to a Reformed temple. My wife, when we got married, I stayed with Beth Israel. She stayed with her son, I hope Shalom now, and she stayed
Are you
with the
Sue?
Reformed temple. And I go to services at both. And I'll tell
I
you
didn't hear what you
something.
said.
I go to Beth Israel, and I sort of miss the organ now, and I really wasn't that much for it at the time. So
I'll pass it
I
along.
kind of
I
miss the
try.
instrumentation.
I'll pass it along.
Sort of my comment.
Here she comes.
Did you guys hear or no?
No.
Okay, so he was saying more of a comment than a question, that he now misses the organ. He is a member of a Reformed shul and here, and now we very rarely, we have the cantor's guitar for a little bit of the morning, but he was saying how he now misses the organ, and like I said, more of a comment than a question.
Well, I prefer synthesizers myself to an organ.
Fine with me.
But yeah, and more than anything else, I love my son's guitar playing at any service. He plays guitar. But, again, there is no reason that a congregation like Beth Israel cannot have more than one service to appeal to more than one group of people within the congregation. But we have to start breaking the envelope, tearing it open, raising the flaps of those tents to bring more people in and to offer more possibilities for engagement. So with that, I will say good night to everyone. And I will hopefully see you all tomorrow morning for Minyan.
I got a doctor's appointment.